So in light of everything going on in the world, I just felt the need to hit record. And whatever I put on the internet, I put on the internet, and I'm just gonna put it here. I started comedy as a result of seeing society shift during a time when the United States was at war still, and there were results of this war. So I'm a millennial in an older age, and I grew up under the Iraq-Afghanistan war, under being told, as a young child, like when 9/11 happened, I was a sophomore in high school, and I distinctly remember the rhetoric always being, imagine, like, media was not the way it is now. It was like TV. There was some like social media like budding, but it wasn't the way it is now. And so like all of our news was from like CNN or news stations. So what happened with us was like we had a president that was like telling us there were evildoers. Literally, that was the term being used, evildoers. And it was just like terrorism being shoved down our faces all the freaking time. And so I just see years later, and the result of that was when I graduated college, and during my college years, I watched the United States in places like Iraq, Afghanistan. There were at the time social media was like popping. Facebook was like popping up a little bit more. There were pictures of people being tortured. Now, prisoners of war happened, but it was the U.S. doing this to people in a place called Guantanamo Bay. I just remember realizing then that the U.S. was the bad guy in so many capacities. And I just started asking more and more questions, in high school, like, why is this being shoved in our faces in this way? And then started asking more questions in college, and just kind of wondering what the hell is going on. Like, it just seems like this is about oil and resources and power grabs for the United States. And then I got into research. So I was a biology and international studies student in college, with the idea that I would go into some sort of international medicine or do something to help people, because when you're growing up, you're taught like this is the best medicine, like whatever, Western medicine, etc., etc. So I thought I would be like providing, like, I don't know, like if I were to do an ideal like job situation, just like access to clean water. It's probably the most important thing on the planet. Access to clean water sources to any nation ever, anywhere ever. I think water is the most important thing to have no matter where you live, which is why I've lived in the desert so much. I have videos on certain media sites where I've lived in, homesteaded in the rural desert. So when I got into research, one of the contracts I was under was military, like downtown, like Baltimore, Maryland, where I'm originally from, outside of Baltimore, D.C. And what I realized years later is these contracts were military contracts during a recession when we had to work for free a lot of the time, because we were under something called a furlough, which is like, because I was university was getting contracts and grants from the state and the government. We basically had to work for free. We did get retroactively paid, but what I was doing was atrocious. I will never be the same person. I will have PTSD for the rest of my life. And it's not isolated to just me. Anybody who does work where it's like your brain is not supposed to see what you see, and that's just like a small on the surface You know, I can't imagine being a little kid in a place like Palestine and watching bombs and not knowing if you're gonna lose a family member, lose your life. And then recently hearing the Tucker Carlson interview of Anthony Aguilar, who's the whistleblower who was with a contractor for the US to go and help, quote unquote, with aid services in Palestine. And it was basically just a free-for-all, and aid services were in combat zones, which is like Guantanamo Bay, and just like all of the loopholes that the United States like has, because Guantanamo Bay is part of Cuba, but there's like loopholes because of you know, U.S. Stations and things like that. The U.S. government has military bases everywhere, pretty much around the world. So there's loopholes upon loopholes, and then you can put contractors there, even if it's like, so say if it's like a territory and you can't have like you can't have like soldiers, that you can put contractors there. It's just so fucking crazy what a contract does. Everything that's going on between Israel and Palestine right now kind of is just bringing back a lot of these memories about a lot of, I don't know how to categorize like the millennial experience, because if I look at Gen Z and younger, they're gonna have their own trauma going, and they already do. There's something called the Gen Z stare. There's a reason for that, you know. I think a lot of these kinds of traumatic situations are brought to populations in different increments for a psychological purpose, in order to train us, almost, in a way. And yes, there's going to be those who wake up in different increments. I think I'm lucky because I saw things behind closed doors. Maybe others didn't. I didn't know at the time that that's what I was seeing. But years later, seeing certain people that were proponents of contracts still getting massive amounts of money from places like the DOD, which is now being called the Department of War. So I'm gonna post these videos even though, you know, a lot of this is like my trauma coming out, so it's not gonna be in perfect alignment thought process, but I will be able to kind of get more coherent thoughts. Right now, I'm just gonna be putting this TikTok wherever I need to put it. You know, the reason why I started stand-up comedy was because it was always hard for me to actually get these stories out. And I thought it would be a place to get the stories out and hopefully figure out how to make it funny. What I realized when I started stand-up comedy is it's a tough career for women to be in, and a lot of the well-paid comedians are still these men that act a lot like the US military in a certain way. It's just another form of it. It's hard to explain, like, stand-up comedy is like the US military, but it kind of is, because it's like men, it's their sport, you know, male language, the triangulation of the male patriarchal, I guess, misogynistic language. Look, I'll keep talking about it. Is it gonna be perfect right now? No, but I'll get there. I'll get to a point. For those who hear me, you hear me. For those who don't hear me and want to make fun of me or call me dumb, I researched in epigenetics at Columbia University Medical Center, and I researched in primate studies. I was just a cog in the wheel, but I've seen some ish that you haven't seen and probably never have to deal with. So if you want to call me dumb, I've endured a freaking lot. And at this point, I have nothing to lose. So, just like Brody Stevens said, enjoy it. Enjoy it, y'all.